What happens when a peaceful lakeside refuge becomes the flashpoint in a battle against overreaching bureaucracy? When Ethan Caldwell finds a brazen ultimatum taped to his family's boat, he realizes his quiet retreat is about to erupt into a full-blown war for Lake Fairview. Ethan Caldwell awoke to birdsong and the gentle lapping of water against his dock. He had come here 6 months earlier to escape the unrelenting pace of Silicon Valley life. One boardroom after another, investors pressing for ever higher growth, and deadlines that blurred into sleepless nights. All of that was gone now. He owned a restored cabin perched under towering pines, a weathered aluminum pontoon he'd inherited from his grandfather, and 60 acres of water and shoreline that stretched farther than the eye could see. That tranquility shattered the moment he found the violation notice. Taped, neatly, officiously, to his pontoon, a neon orange slip declared he must remove his own boat from his lake within 48 hours or face a $500 daily fine. Worse yet, the Crestwood Shores Homeowners Council threatened to tow the vessel at his expense. Ethan let out a sharp laugh, the absurdity of it crashing into the morning calm. Who were these self-appointed gatekeepers, daring to dictate terms on private property held by his family for 3 generations? He stepped onto the dock, notice in hand, and stared out over placid waters. The air held the scent of pine resin and damp earth. The mist hovered just above the glassy surface. Here, his grandfather had found solitude and inspiration, trading a naval career for conservation, teaching neighborhood kids to fish and respect the watershed. "Water sustains life," the old man used to say, voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Guard it with everything you've got." Ethan had built his own kind of empire in that spirit of respect, protecting financial institutions from cyber attacks, growing cyber shield solutions into a multi-million-dollar success. Yet, when a tech conglomerate offered more zeros in his bank account than he ever imagined, he walked away. He craved the rhythms of nature and the simple tug of a fishing line after decades spent chasing metrics. But now, the council's edict threatened not only his peace but his heritage. He shoved the notice into his jacket pocket and headed to the cabin, each board creaking underfoot like an alarm. Inside, his laptop glowed with email alerts and market charts, an unwelcome intrusion. He shut it with a snap, then dialed his neighbor and friend, Carlos Reyes. Carlos, a retired firefighter whose gruff exterior melted into laughter whenever he recalled Ethan's grandfather brandishing a shotgun to ward off trespassers, answered on the first ring. "Morning, Ethan," Carlos said. "What's got you rattled?" Ethan recounted the notice. Silence crackled through the line. "Those council vultures have been pushing dues up for lake maintenance while parading on your waters for years," Carlos growled. "Your grandfather would have chased them off with rock salt. Let me swing by with coffee and binoculars." By the time Carlos arrived, Ethan had pulled up the HOA's website. The proof was damning. Photo galleries celebrating the Elite Anglers Invitational on Lake Fairview, banners draped across a temporary dock on Ethan's eastern shore, and promises of catered banquets, none of which he had authorized. The council boasted about community management and aesthetic guidelines, all while charging neighbors fees under false pretenses. Carlos passed Ethan a steaming mug. "Time to collect your deeds," he said. "And maybe install a camera or 2. Ethan nodded, resolve hardening like winter ice. He dialed his college friend, Marissa Grant, now a prominent water rights attorney. After he explained the situation, her booming laughter echoed across the line. "You own the lake bed and the water rights, Ethan. They have no legal leg to stand on, just paperwork they dreamt up. Gather every deed, survey, and email. We'll build a dossier that humbles them." That afternoon, Ethan retrieved his grandfather's original deed from a battered filing cabinet, along with the 2010 survey map his father had commissioned. He laid them on the cabin's pine-slatted kitchen table, their edges curling with age. Outside, the pontoon bobbed serenely, blissfully unaware of the storm it had unleashed. As the sun dipped low, turning the lake gold, Ethan felt the first stirrings of purpose. This was no longer a weekend retreat. It was a battleground to defend his family's legacy. By dawn the next day, Ethan was at the county clerk's office, tracing dusty records in the basement archive. He thumbed through decades-old ledgers and blue-tinted survey sheets, each embossed stamp a testament to Lake Fairview's unambiguous private status. The original 1952 deed bore his grandfather's signature and a clear description: 60 acres of water plus a 20-foot buffer of shoreline on all sides. There were no easements, no public use covenants, nothing that granted the HOA or anyone else the right to monopoly control. Back at the cabin, he spread the documents under the glow of a desk lamp. The survey map from 2010 confirmed every inlet and cove as family property. He photographed each page, backing them up on an encrypted drive. Night descended, and the cameras, small, weatherproof cylinders, whirred into life, pointed at the eastern shore and the canoe launch. If a council-sanctioned fishing tournament returned, it would be captured in high definition. That afternoon, Marissa called. "Your deeds are ironclad," she declared. "The council has been trespassing, misappropriating fees, and misrepresenting authority. You can file suit, but let's bait them first. I want them to admit on record that they manage your lake. Attend their next meeting, record every word." Ethan agreed. Armed with a miniature audio recorder and his flannel shirt, now a uniform of defiance, he RSVP'd to the HOA's mass invitation for their quarterly gathering in the Crestwood Community Center, a marble-floored hall that stood in stark contrast to his rustic cabin. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear. Residents trickled in, clutching coffee cups and printed agendas. Howard Sinclair, the polished HOA president with silver-flecked hair and a navy blazer, took the podium. He droned on about mailbox specifications and landscaping proposals before turning to lake regulations. "We've had reports of unauthorized vessels violating aesthetic standards," Sinclair announced, voice immaculate. "All boats must display the new council decal by next Monday." Ethan raised his hand. A hush fell. Sinclair's practiced smile faltered. "Yes? Who holds the deed to Lake Fairview?" Ethan asked. "Does the council possess a deed, an easement, or any legal instrument granting oversight?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sinclair swallowed. "Historical agreements are in place," he replied, tone clipped. "The specifics aren't pertinent to today's agenda." Ethan clicked his recorder onto the table. "Then please publish those agreements in next quarter's minutes." Silence ensued. Vice President Ava Montgomery cleared her throat but offered no help. Ethan's heart pounded. He just captured their admission of undisclosed agreements that didn't exist in public records. After the meeting, Gerald Whitman, head of the Elite Anglers Club, approached with feigned cordiality and handed Ethan an invitation to their next invitational event. Ethan accepted, binoculars already in his jacket pocket. That evening, he and Marissa reviewed the recorded audio and cross-checked it with his deeds and survey maps. "Tomorrow," Marissa said, "we file for an emergency injunction. With this evidence, a judge will freeze any unauthorized activity on your property." As the moon rose over Lake Fairview, Ethan felt neither relief nor triumph, only the steady promise of justice pursued methodically. He slid into bed, his dreams echoing his grandfather's words, "Respect the water, and it will respect you." The morning of the Elite Anglers Invitational dawned in radiant sunshine. Trucks hauled polished boats through Ethan's private driveway to the eastern cove. White canvas tents blossomed along the shoreline. Banners fluttered in the breeze. Investors in pressed suits studied architectural renderings of luxury developments, golf courses, condo towers, promises of breathtaking profit on land they did not own. Ethan and Marissa watched from behind dockside trees, cameras trained on every detail. Sinclair and Montgomery were on stage, extolling the council's vision for Lake Fairview, using phrases like community management and historical stewardship as though they held a deed. Crowds cheered at the prospect of exclusive access, unaware they were trespassing on private property. At high noon, Marissa sent the injunction filing to the county court. Within hours, Judge Harmon signed an emergency order. All unauthorized gatherings on Lake Fairview must cease immediately. Early the next morning, a county deputy flanked Ethan and Marissa at the eastern shore. "This property is under injunction," the deputy announced into a megaphone. "All persons are ordered to vacate immediately." Pandemonium swept across the cove. Tents collapsed, boats spun in reverse, and well-heeled spectators scurried for trailers. Thunderous engines roared as vessels pulled away. Sinclair sputtered protests. Gerald Whitman's face turned beet red. The deputy held the injunction aloft, and the crowd fell silent. Within 24 hours, local reporter Jenna Morales ran the story. Homeowner versus HOA. The battle for Lake Fairview. Front-page headlines recounted trespassing, misappropriated fees, and fraudulent promises to investors. Social media ignited with outraged neighbors demanding restitution. Crestwood Shores convened an emergency board meeting. One by one, long-standing members resigned. Sinclair and Montgomery were conspicuously absent. Rumor had it they fled town to avoid accountability. In their place, retired Judge Henry Wallace was elected interim president. His first act was to invite Ethan to address the community. In the crowded community center where Ethan had once recorded their admissions, he now stood to speak for unity. He recounted his grandfather's legacy of stewardship, the council's deception, and the evidence that proved Lake Fairview's uncompromised private status. Then he unveiled a proposal: the Cooperative Lake Trust, a nonprofit to manage responsible public access under transparent bylaws and equitable annual permits. Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. Neighbors shook hands and offered apologies. "Your grandfather would be proud," an elderly woman whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Legal fallout continued. Investors sued Sinclair for fraud, alleging misrepresentation of property rights. The sheriff's office launched a financial inquiry into the council's lake maintenance funds. Marissa guided each motion, her steely competence a bulwark against further abuses. 2 weeks later, Lake Fairview's Eastern Cove reopened as a modest public park. A handcrafted wooden pier stretched into calm waters, picnic tables dotted the grassy bank, and a simple plaque honored Ethan's grandfather. "Water sustains life, guard it well." The Cooperative Lake Trust's bylaws were on display in the park kiosk, alongside transparent financial reports showing how permit fees funded genuine conservation efforts, water testing, invasive species removal, and habitat restoration. Ethan piloted his vintage aluminum pontoon at sunrise, coffee in hand and fishing rod at the ready. His flannel shirt and jeans were as familiar as old friends. Carlos Reyes joined him, whistling as he baited a hook. "Never thought I'd see the day," Carlos said, grinning at families strolling the park. "All that fuss, and look how happy everyone is now." Ethan cast his line, watching ripples fan out across glass-like water. He reflected on how a violation notice had ignited a careful campaign of research, documentation, and legal strategy, transforming conflict into renewal. Under Judge Wallace's oversight, the council's role shifted from clandestine bureaucrats to supportive community partners. The old Anglers Club rebranded as the Fairview Community Anglers, welcoming newcomers to conservation workshops and family tournaments. Spring lilies bloomed along the shoreline. Dragonflies skimmed the surface. Bass nibbled beneath the boat's shadow. The lake glowed with renewed health. At the Trust's first annual meeting, Ethan presented Grandpa's original fishing rod, gifted to him that morning, and handed it to Judge Wallace. "For stewardship," he said softly. "May this remind us always why we guard these waters." To the applause of neighbors turned friends, the Cooperative Lake Trust cemented a legacy that honored private ownership and public benefit in equal measure. As Ethan drifted toward the eastern pier, he felt the weight of responsibility settle comfortably on his shoulders. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind: "Respect the water, and it will respect you." In Lake Fairview's mirror, he saw not only his own reflection but the promise of generations to come.